All right. So we're going to be talking about the 1950 census, and it is coming out. It's going to be released April 1st to the public. So a lot of the questions we're going to be talking about, some of this is just going to be how you're going to be able to prepare, where you're going to be to access it, and kind of what the process is going to be here for the next few months of how you're going to be able to search it. So let me get my PowerPoint to move forward here. Okay, so the census is every 10 years, which many of you probably know. We just did one back in 2020. There's a 72-year rule where every U.S. census is closed to the public for 72 years after enumeration. So that means that the 1950 census is going to be available April 1st of 2022. The only exception to this rule is if an enumerated individual asks to see their personal data from the census. So you can ask for your own, but you can't ask for someone else's. The National Archives and Records Administration is the keeper of all the census records. And if you were interested in looking at statistical data from census records, you can do that for any of those censuses from 1790 to 2020. You can do that at www.census.gov. So what can I find on the 1950 census? There were over 150 million people enumerated. That's almost 15% more than the 1940 census. And the largest state enumerated was New York with 14.8 million. And the smallest state was 160,000, which was Nevada. And this 1950 census, if you'll remember, Hawaii and Alaska are not states yet, but they are encompassed in the census records. They have their own census records that are taken. They're not with the continental U.S. ones, but other territories, America Samoa, the Canal Zone, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands are also included in these. And I'll have an example later of what those individual census records look like for those places. This is the first census to enumerate Americans living abroad. So if you have a family member that you're researching who may have lived in Europe or somewhere else outside of the U.S., you possibly can find them on this census. This is also an interesting thing they did, where they had infant cards which were completed for each baby that was born after January 1st, 1950. And that's kind of like with the little image here. This little ad is showing you that they're going to be doing infant cards. It is estimated that about 4% of the population was missed on the census. So even though this one, they took some steps to make it a little more thorough so that they would get a more people enumerated, they did miss some people. So it is a chance that someone you're looking for may have been missed. What information can I find on the 1950 census? A lot of this information is going to be things that you've seen before. So someone's address, whether their house is a farm, their name, relationship to the head of household, their race, gender, age, birthplace, marital status, employment status, how many hours they've worked, what their job is, and things of that nature. A lot of that is going to be very similar to what you've seen on previous census records. One interesting thing, though, I did discover is that each of these is going to have a sample, like they normally at the bottom of the census record for 1940. I know they do this. They will have an area where they'll have a little further information about an individual. The 1950 took it a little bit farther, and they actually asked more in-depth questions in that section, like about someone's fertility or their marital history. So those are things that we really haven't seen before on a census. So I know this image is small, but I'm going to show you some parts that I have managed to zoom into, but this is what the 1950 census sample looks like. So this is the form that census takers would have been filling out for people. And this is pretty much all we can see of it right now. We can't look at images with actual information filled out. We can do that on April 1st, though. So here's a little zoomed in portion of the name questions they ask. What's the name of the household? what are the names of other persons, and they tell you to list them in a particular order. So that can be helpful when you're researching. If you look at the instructions that an enumerator was given, sometimes that can help you interpret some of the information a little better. The next zoomed in portion that I'm going to show you is about population and housing. This was a more detailed than they have been in the past. This is for persons 14 years of age or older, and it has very detailed questions about what kind of work they do, what kind of industry they're in, and also, even though he didn't work last week, does he still have a job or business? I mean, they have very detailed questions here that some censuses in the past have not. And then this is the bottom section that we talked about a little bit earlier, where you can see that they really do have a lot of tick marks here they have to check. There's a lot of information they have to fill in here. They even have a section where you put in your name, and then it also has a place for mother and father, what country your parents were born in, and then it goes into, whether they've attended school, and then also even down to if they've served in the military, and so on and so forth. So this is a much more detailed sample. So hopefully this will be helpful for some people looking for relatives. So here's another sample. This is the individual census report. So this, you would have gotten this if you were missed. If a census taker came by your house and you weren't there, then you would have most likely received this in the mail, and then you would have filled it out yourself and then mailed it in. And that way they could still have counted you. And then this is the overseas census report. So if you were one of those Americans who were living abroad, this is the form that you would have filled out and then mailed in. And you can see it says very clearly, do not fill this form if your place of residence on April 1st, 1950 is in, and it is all of the territories. And it also says continental United States, because if you were in a territory, you would have filled out something more like this form. So this is one, each of the territories has their own, and this one is from Puerto Rico. You can see all of it is in Spanish. So this is what that form would have looked like. All right, so let's talk about why some of the enumeration numbers were better than 10 years prior in 1940. So the government really took a big step in trying to improve the numbers and getting more people counted, and making sure that the information was accurate and that you were counting more people, which often, has a big impact on our country as far as voting districts and things like that. So they had more training for census takers. They showed them films on how to enumerate districts. They improved data such as detailed street maps of assigned areas. So the enumerators would actually have, they would know exactly where they were going to go, and they had less likely chance of getting lost. They published missing person forms in local newspapers. So if they hadn't found someone that was going to be enumerated, they would actually publish forms in a local newspaper to try and track that person down to get them counted. They had specific nights that they set to enumerate certain groups. So some examples would be like people who live in hotels, maybe they don't have a permanent residence, tourists, areas with high numbers of known transients. So they would have particular nights that they would gather and try to enumerate people who maybe were touring areas or maybe were homeless and things of that nature. This census was rechecked for accuracy more thoroughly than in past years, and sample size areas were re-interviewed to determine their accuracy. Enumeration began April 1st, 1950, and it was 90% completed by April 30th. And I think they actually ended up completing it fully in like June or July, maybe. So these training films and instructions, these can be great things for you to watch if you want to know more about the instructions they were given to help better understand the information put on the census. This image is of one of the training film videos. You can find these on NARA's website and also YouTube if you're interested in viewing them. But the instructions are freely available online for the enumerators. So where can I find the 1950 census on April 1st? Well, NARA is going to release it And then once they do, Ancestry and Family Search are going to then download it. Now, you as an individual can download it yourself too. But April 1st, they're going to offer you the ability to download it for yourself. And then that's the same day that Ancestry and Family Search are going to get it. They're not going to get it any earlier than anyone else. So the 1950 census microfilm that is at NARA has already been digitized, and it will be released April 1st on archives.gov. From what I've been able to gather, they're actually going to have their own website that they're creating that you can access a lot of this information. There's going to be an automated index of surnames and places that will be available as well through NARA. And it's not totally sure so far how exactly that's going to work. But from what I've been able to gather from their blog is that they're going to have a website where you can search for those things there. After they've been able to kind of crowdsource, a transcription tool will be created, and they will release that so that more data can be indexed more accurately. Okay, so they're going to actually have the 1950 census available for download through Amazon's Web Services Registry of Open Data. And that's where you can go. They should have a link on their website, and you can go there and download it there. If you want more information about the 1950 census, NARA has a great blog called History's Hub, and that's actually where I got a lot of the information that I was able to find. They've been blogging for over a year about their process of how they're going to disseminate the census information, and also what you're going to be able to find on the census. They also are going to have a web series. I know they've already started it, and it's free, and there's no registration. You can find it on their webpage and their YouTube channel, and you're going to be able to, as far as I know, they're going to talk about what to expect and how to use their website, etc., to find people on the census. So Ancestry and Family Search, they're going to download the census data from NARA on April 1st. And then they are going to, from what I could gather, Ancestry has a computer-assisted index that they're going to then put it through, and it's going to index the census. From what I can tell, it sounds like NARA is doing the same thing, but NARA's is only going to really be able to index surnames and places, and Ancestry's is supposed to do a much more thorough job than that. And then after that is complete, they're going to try and have crowdsourcing available like NARA is going to do, where they can fix some errors and index more things that maybe the computer couldn't do. Family Search and Ancestry estimate that this will probably take 6 months for there to be a searchable index. So it's important to remember that how we can get on Ancestry or Family Search right now and search for a person's name by putting in, John Smith, Montgomery County, Alabama. That's not going to be available early on for 1950. It's going to be a much more hands-on approach on how you search. That easy searchable keyword indexing will not be done until a little bit later. Hopefully it'll be 6 months and not longer than that. So this is the homepage for the Family Search Community Project. This is where they're going to be trying to get volunteers to assist in the fixing the indexing. So this is where you or your organization or group can sign up to help with the indexing and maybe get it done a little faster than 6 months. So how do I find something on the 1950 census? Since we're not going to be able to keyword search really quickly, it is important to start thinking now about how to get prepared and how you're going to be able to find someone. So you need to try and find out now as much as you can about who you think will be on the 1950 census and where you think they would be. So you want to collect as much information as you can find on these people. So you need to find addresses or get as close as you can to determining an exact spot of where someone would be. For some of us, that's easier than others, but I'm going to show you an example a little later, and it's going to try to show you how it can be easy but also complicated. So types of records you can use to find someone or try to find where they are. You can use city directories, you can use telephone books, previous census information, World War II draft cards, marriage records, and then naturalization petitions and things of that nature. Some of it, like the World War II draft cards, that information by 1950 is going to be 7 or 8 years old. But if that's the best you can get, that's a good starting point. You want to identify using that address information, get as close as you can to identifying an enumeration district where you think that person will be in 1950. Enumeration district maps are available online, and you can use those to determine where you think that person would be. And then when you're able to download the information or look on NARA or Ancestry or Family Search, you can go to that enumeration district and search page by page for the person you're looking for. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how you identify an enumeration district. So these maps are available online right now. You can look at 1950s right now, you can look at 1940, and so on. But you can use a combination of the 1950 maps and present-day maps to determine a residential area of interest for the person you're looking for. NARA has some great resources you can use. I accessed all of the enumeration districts I was able to find, well, their maps from them. So that was a great place to start. The 1940 census maps for enumeration districts have stayed the same, but in some places they are different. So if you do happen to use the 1940 and the 1950, just know that they may have changed a little bit over the course of 10 years. So let's talk about the Steve Morse website. So this is a website that has a lot of census information on it. Users can search here using surnames for census years prior to the 1950, of course. You can search census codes for numerous years to determine their meaning, and you also can search the enumeration maps on this website. It also is trying to make it easy for you to go back and forth between 1940 and 1950 so that you can use those interchangeably. So if you do decide to use this website, they've tried to help you set up a guide that'll kind of help you find resources to finding people you're looking for. And we're going to just kind of briefly go through some of the steps. I thought that might be a little helpful. So when you tell them that you are wanting to access 1950 census, they pop up a little question for you, and it says, do you know the city, town, rural area, or institution in which your family lived in April 1950? And you answer yes or no. If you answer no, then it'll give you a list. You can see down below this second graphic here. It gives you a list of all of the different types of materials that you can use to try and find somebody. And then if you answer yes, then this graphic will come up and you can use any of those to keep continuing further, and it'll give you hints and clues about how to keep going forward on your research. So now we're going to look at enumeration districts. So I'm going to show you one of a county and of a city, and then we're going to go a little farther into it. The 1950 enumeration district, this is for the city of Greenville. You can see the 721, 720, 722, and so on. Those are the actual enumeration districts. So, and then it also has wards. So you'll see that cities are going to have wards and the enumeration districts, and the bigger areas, counties, they won't have the wards. They'll have just the enumeration numbers. So you can see here. So if you lived in Greenville in 1950, you could find maybe what street you're looking for and figure out which enumeration district it comes from, and that'll give you a starting point for where to look on the 1950 census. Now, obviously, you would have to make sure that, the city of Greenville has probably changed a lot over the years. So if you're thinking about it in terms of today, it's going to be a lot different than it was in 1950. And if you're thinking about it in 1920, it's going to be a lot different than it was in 1950. So keep those things in mind as you're going through this. So this is what one for a whole county looks like. This is Otago County. And you can see that It's got precinct marks, and it also has the 127, 128. Those are the enumeration districts. It'll have, usually it calls them by name, which you've probably noticed on census records that it will do that. So you can say, okay, I know my relative lived somewhere in the Bethel area. So you'll know they're going to be in this upper corner here. And then you can zoom in on the map and try to determine to make sure that's the area they're in. Okay, so let's go over an example. This is my grandfather, and he was born in 1932, and he is going to be on the 1950 census. And I've seen him on the 1940, so I know where he was in 1940, but I've obviously never seen him on the 1950 census. And a lot happened in the 1950s to him. He graduated high school, he joined the Army, he got married, he moved out of Alabama, and he also became a father. And that's me and him many, many years after 1950. So this is him circa 1950. And I've highlighted here, this is the 1940 census, where you can see he is living with his parents. And he lives in Starlington Road, is what it says. He's there with his parents, Marcellus and Annabelle, and his siblings. And he lives on Starlington Road in Enumeration District 723A. And he lives in Butler County. And it's got more information. It says Beat 14, Georgiana. There again. Enumeration District number 723A. So that's where he is in 1940. So that gives me an idea of where to start looking for him. And he is 7 in 1940, so I know that he's about 17 or 18 in 1950 because it's when he graduated high school. So I assume that he's going to be in the household with his parents on the 1950 census. So where will he be in 1950? So on the left-hand side of the screen, there is the southwest portion of the Butler County 1940 Enumeration District map. And on the right-hand side is the Butler County 1950 enumeration map. So you can kind of see they look very, very different because the images that are available to researchers look very different from each other. The 1940, they only show you portions of the map, or the 1950, they show you the whole map. And if you just look at a very close look, the districts are similar, but they are different. They are similar, but they are very different. So I know immediately that most likely he is not going to be in the 723A district in 1950. And up close, I know where he is in 1940, so I go ahead and identify that map. I know he's in 723, and there's Starlington. He lived in Starlington Road, and I know from my family history that he was from the Starlington area. So there's Starlington, and there's 723. So that makes me think that he lives somewhere in between there in that circle. That's what I'm guessing. So I'm going to now look at the 1950 and try to figure out where do I think he would be. So this is a more up close version, and I know these images are small, but it is the biggest I could get them where they're still legible. So this PowerPoint presentation is going to be available later on our YouTube page. So, and I encourage you to please, look these things up at NARA, and you can find larger images. Unfortunately, this is the largest I can get. It's usually hard when we do these things online to get images that are really large. So this is a closer up view of the 1950 Enumeration District map. And that little green circle there is where the 723 Enumeration District is on that map. That says it's close to Greenville. And Georgiana, where my grandfather is from, is way down south. So I know immediately that he is not going to be in the exact same enumeration district as he was in 1940. I'm guessing that he's still in this particular area. So on April 1st, when I get to look on the census for him, instead of looking in the exact same enumeration district number that he was on in 1940, it's changed. So I'm going to use this 1950 map, and I know exactly around where he probably was living, and I'm going to look in those enumeration districts. So I'm going to look in the Starlington one, 7, which is 7-2, and the Georgiana ones, which there are several of those. But I'm going to look in around that big circle. That's what I'm going to try and do to determine where he was. And that's really, unfortunately, the best that it's going to be. It is going to be difficult, but you're going to have to use tools like that to determine. And I chose to show y'all the more complicated one because I don't know exactly where he was in 1950 instead of doing the easy one, which was my grandmother, where I know exactly where she was. I know down to the road where she lived. So, and for him, I don't know that. So that is the end of our presentation. I'll be happy to take questions now. I always like to remind everybody, please come and visit us here at the archives. Our research room where I work is open Tuesday through Saturday, 8:30 to 4:30. And our Voices Museum, which is on the second floor, is open Monday through Saturday, 8:30 to 4:30. So does anyone have any questions? Okay, so no questions. All right, well, I agree, Kathy. It is. I'm hope that it is helpful. I hope, and I know that it's a lot of kind of what if scenarios that I just gave you all, but hopefully April 1st we'll have more understanding of how we're going to be able to search things, and so I'm hoping so, but hopefully it all makes sense and it'll be helpful to you April 1st. Anybody else have any questions? I'm glad we were able to get through this the whole way this time instead of in the middle of it being cut off. Oh, wow, Betsy, that's awesome. That's awesome. I am from Georgiana as well. So well, if no one else has any more questions, I guess we're going to sign off, but thank y'all all so much for joining me, and I'm really glad I got to share my grandfather with y'all. Ooh, okay. We do have a question down here. Any advice if you're researching the list of names of folks living in a community in 1950? Well, what I would say is if you know where the community is, you can probably find them in 1950. Because I do think based on how we're going to have to search things at first, it is going to actually be easier to find people if you know where they were. So, like my grandmother is from Ancestry, which is a tiny, tiny, tiny community close to Georgiana, and I know she was there. So because of that, it's going to be a lot easier for me to find her and her siblings and her grandparents and her aunts and uncles. So if you're researching a community, I think it'll actually be easier for you to find people in that community. I hope that answers your question. But it should definitely be easier right now to find people in a place than finding just people randomly. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, we're going to sign off. And thank you all so much for joining us today. And please join us next time.